Personal selling is essentially direct person-to-person communication between sellers and potential customers with the aim of persuading them to purchase products. You would have noticed that some companies do use salespeople to build these relationships and engage future customers to determine their needs and attain a sales order that may not otherwise have been placed. Today, we will be exploring what the personal selling process looks like with our guest who has a considerable amount of experience in the field. Here is what I know about him. Our guest is passionate about turning experts into authorities. He is known as the expert strategist, is the co-founder of GtTeX, is a Forbes and Huffington Post contributor, TEDx speaker, host of the podcast Explode Your Expert Business, and the author of a few life-changing books. Every year, he usually speaks in front of more than 5,000 business leaders and has shared the stage with the likes of Les Brown, Trent Shelton, and many more. He has also organized over 170 events. Simone Vincenzi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Vinay. I'm excited to be here today.
Likewise, a pleasure to have you. Simone, we'll talk about personal selling in a bit, and I understand from what we were talking about previously that you help create predictable business by turning experts into authorities. But I'm a bit curious as to what you would say your personal area of strength is.
Conversion. Anything conversion related is my absolute area of strength, and as well PR and media. So these are the two things where I'm the strongest at. I'm obsessed with looking at ways in which a product or service or a funnel can convert more, whether it's by adding automation or whether it's adding personal touch. I'm a fan of the hybrid ways of doing business. And on the PR and media side, I absolutely love, not only for myself, but also for my clients, getting people on TV, radio, major magazines or newspaper. I actually just did an interview, a TV interview, a couple of hours ago before coming on this show. So it's a part of the game that I really love.
And in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know, but should?
That's a very good point. So around conversion, I will say that it takes very few people convert immediately. And I think that a lot of people, what they do when they build their pipelines, they look at deals to be closed sometimes within like 1 month or 2 months. Well, actually, for a new lead, it might take 6 to 12 months for the deals to be closed.
Right.
And that messes up their entire pipeline and forecast. That's on the area of conversion. And on the area of PR and media, that is not as difficult as people make it. Because people think that, you know, if reaching out to a journalist or to a TV presenter, it's too big for them. It's too difficult, or there are too many barriers, or they think, who am I to be on a TV channel or a TV station?
Yeah.
But actually, they are people. They are people, and they're looking for stories. So they need you as much as you need them.
And we'll dive into that perhaps in a bit, but perhaps a good point of orientation would be, I guess, to ask you what you believe is personal selling, or how would you define it?
I would define personal selling is like in a way where you build a relationship, a personal relationship with a prospect. That's, so if you say the word personal selling, that's what it comes to me. Because at the end of the day, selling is all about relationship. Whether you develop that relationship with automated tools or with an in-person relationship, then it's still building trust and building relationship. That's what that word means to me.
So in an age where I guess there are a number of different options when it comes to sales, specifically everything from telesales onwards, how do you see personal selling fitting into that entire mix?
Well, it's a part of the process. I think everything is a touch point. Right? You mentioned, for example, there is telesales, there is social media, there is email newsletters, there is expos. There are a lot of ways in which you can sell a product or service. And I don't say that one is better than the other. I say that every single sales strategy has a place within a particular sales model. So for example, some people might go to an expo and expect to get clients straight away, where actually the expo is part of the awareness part of the sales strategy, not the conversion part, whether like the personal call or a personal, like in face-to-face relationship, then it might be part of the closing, but not at the starting point because it's too soon. So I think that every element has a purpose if the touch points are studied.
So if I could put this in another way, it's about maximizing the touch points to deepen the relationship with your potential prospects.
Absolutely.
Another question comes to mind, which is, given that you've been doing this for a while, should we really be looking at prospecting with a short time frame as opposed to something like 5 years?
Oh, it depends on the business. It really depends on the business, because I'll give an example. With GtTeX, we have 3 companies, and also we have a small portfolio of companies that we have invested in. Now, every sales cycle is very different. So if I'm working with a small business owner personally and turning experts into authorities. So for me, the conversion cycle actually can be quite fast because I'm always talking to the decision maker all the time.
Yeah.
I don't need to go through layers of decision makers. They like me. Sometimes they see me within half an hour. I made a sale. First time we meet each other. Then in another company that we have, which is a recruitment agency, and we also have a sales training for a recruitment agency, a sales cycle can be 6 to 9 months to fully, like from the first touch point to onboarding the clients. And that's because the industry and the kind of companies that we work with, by nature, if you approach them cold, it requires that natural sales cycle. Of course, sometimes it happens that there is a recommendation that shortens the process, but if we are approaching them. So I think that depending on the industry that you're in and the company that you run, then you determine how long your sales cycle should be.
Would it be fair to say that sales cycles really shouldn't be determined based on numbers, at least from what you were saying, but rather based on, I guess, how far you take the relationship?
I think it actually is both, because it depends also on the, to close a bigger deal. So the bigger the number, the longer could be the time that you take. But it's not the only factor, because we've closed 6-figure deals in sometimes a month, in 30 days, where it took for a $10,000 to £1,000 deal, it might have taken like 9 months.
Right.
So it depends very much on the industry, how easy it is to build a relationship with that person.
Yep.
And also you're looking at the perfect fit for your product and services and their needs, when they have the budget, when they have that opening. For example, I'm talking to a really large and important company in the UK for some training their staff in personal branding, in public speaking, and so on. And it came, actually, the conversation, it looks like it's speeding up quite a bit because of the time. So if normally I would maybe take 9 months to get in that company, because we had the conversation, the first touch point at the right time, then now within a couple of months, if it goes ahead, then we might be able to close the deal. So there are so many different factors for
But would you say that there are any particular disadvantages to the process of personal selling?
There are.
Should be aware of? Yep.
Yeah,
apart from, say, time, for example, with this.
I mean, on the process, if you only rely, for example, on the process of personal selling, then you mentioned already, time is very time intensive. It's less scalable unless you have a large sales team, or you hire more salespeople. And on the other side, someone that doesn't know you is very unlikely to jump on a call with you. So if you're or a meeting. So if you're waiting to only that point, now you're playing a really much higher number game where you're contacting, 100 or 200, like maybe every 300 people that you contact, you get 3-4 meetings. While if you then use other strategy and have personal selling as a part of the process, then it means that you can only have those meetings at the right time within the sales process. In this case, can be the conversion or the indoctrination part. but not to the front end, because that's where a lot of people or companies fall short, where the first touch point becomes a personal meeting or a personal conversation. And if I don't know you, then I might listen to you, but I buy from you most of the times.
Yep. So building trust is certainly a key part of that process. I would also say that on the other side, the advantage of personal selling is that it's usually done face-to-face. Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Usually it's done face-to-face, or I mean, screen to screen,
yeah.
as we are now.
Yeah. And therefore the chance to address questions and I guess react more to a person's reactions given what you're saying. Would that be correct?
Exactly. When you are in front of that person, you're able to ask questions and to have an interaction. While when you are, for example, setting up some automated sequences, or when you are doing some marketing material, or you have a presentation, then it's something that you might not be able to do. And that's why, as a part of the process, when you are in front of that person, then you can really understand what's important for them, what parts of your offer are important for them, what parts are not. One of my favorite question that is very difficult to ask in a not in-person sales situation is, what could I do for you to make you say yes straight away? This is like, I love that question, because they tell me, say, okay, if I can do it and I know I can do it, I'll say yes, and then deal is done most of the time. If they say something that I'm not willing to commit to or I can provide, then I will say, no, I can't do that, but I could do this instead. And so that type of conversation only happen in a personal selling situation.
Yep. I'm curious. I don't know if you've been in a situation where you've had someone who's known to lead salespeople on for a bit without really committing to a deal. In a personal selling situation, how do you counter such folk?
I give them a deadline.
Right.
I always give them a deadline. So if I see that they are dragging, so there are different situations. Sometimes they're dragging the deal because of legitimate reasons. Mm-hmm. And maybe there is a meeting that they need to have within the company that didn't happen, and it's not even their fault. And you can smell if they are just like buying time because they don't want to make a decision, or because they are like still browsing around and they want to keep you on hold, or if it's literally they are really interested and something came in the way. So that's the first thing I want to identify. Right. But if, for example, if someone, I see that they don't make a decision, or they stop responding, they avoid answering when it's time to make the final call and so on, then I will send them an email and say, okay, the deal that I offer you now is off the table. Or I'll give them 24 hours to say, if you don't get back to me, it's off the table. And then I wish you the best. If you want to come back, please come back. Because I believe in energies. I don't know if you do, but I believe in energy. And there was an interesting concept that as a salesperson, when you're closing the deal, you're holding energetically that space for the deal to be closed.
Right.
And there are just as many open loops that you can have before your energy spreads too thin.
Right.
And so it's important to have to open a loop and close it, whether it's a yes or a no. At least you know where to stand, so then you know where to focus then your energy for the outcome that you want. So when I heard that concept, it's a bit woo-woo, but I believe it's true. I believe it's true. It resonates.
Okay, certainly. What would be your overall approach to personal selling? Could you walk us through the strategy and how you decide the deadlines and how you should structure the overall process?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm going to show you is like different touch points that lead to that personal selling situation, to the personal selling moment. And I know that there are some people that might listen on the show, but make sure you watch the video, because I'm screen sharing literally a funnel map, like a sales funnel map that I have. So I'm just going to first, before breaking down into the specific, I'm just give you the overview first, so then you can understand the overview. It starts in particular in the corporate world, in the B2B space, from LinkedIn. And what we want to create is then an industry report that can interest them, then where we want to lead them is either a call to see those people that are already immediately interested in taking a step or action, or then the next step is for those people that are not ready to take to an immediate interest, to get them, to invite them to either a webinar or a masterclass, whether it's internal to their company or, for example, external. And I'm going to give you some examples later, which then will lead to then having to then booking a call after the masterclass, so then the sales process can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll also break down the different points if we are going from the very beginning, because, and the reason why the industry report and the call and the masterclass and the other call, they are in this sequence. So an industry report, I love it in particular because it really positions you not only as an expert in your field or in your expertise, but as an expert in your industry. And anyone who is positioned as an industry expert, someone who is on top and have a bird's eye view on the industry, is automatically considered more valuable than someone that has a specific skill or a specific knowledge. So that's why the industry report as a positioning level is crucial. And then it also is more likely to be downloaded, is more likely to be used, is more likely to be downloaded, because it sounds less salesy. When you download an industry report, you don't have in your mind, this person wants to sell me something most of the time. What in your mind you have, oh, I got useful data. I got useful information about my industry, which I'm working in, and therefore I need to know more about it. And so there is a great level of authority and relationship which is built. Now, if I'm going back to the screen share, the next phase is then immediately to follow up or invite people on a phone call, or invite a prospect on a phone call. And that's about timing, because there are, for example, some people that will download the industry report, and there's a very small minority, by the way, but they will already immediately ready to buy, or they're immediately ready to have that conversation, because they have the pain. The pain is right now. They need to find a solution. They have a short time frame to find that solution. So if I don't invite them immediately to have a meeting, I already miss that part, that small part, which is ready to buy now. And then for the majority, which they will not be ready to buy immediately, that's where the masterclass comes into place. And a masterclass or a webinar is great because it not only showcases your expertise in your field, it can get you to expand on the industry report that you have created, but also now it starts positioning parts of the sales conversation. Because when you're selling, what you're doing, the real sale happens when there is a sharing of beliefs. Now, if I want to sell you something, I need you to believe what I believe. Otherwise, you're never going to buy from me. And even when you are doing a sales conversation in person, you spend a lot of time, most salespeople do, and spend a lot of time, talking about why their service is different, why their methodology of work is different, why their product is different, and so on. But your masterclass already taps into that. Your webinar already taps into that. Because it's designed in a way that is giving information, is useful, is not too pitchy, but it gets people to believe what you believe, to think what you think. So then the next step is to invite them on a sales call. Then when that happens, you don't need, it's more a conversation on how can we make this happen. Let's talk numbers. Let's talk the product or the offer. Not talk all, why is it different? Why not someone else? What would you do for me that other people can do now? Because you've already answered that in your masterclass. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you start off with an industry report. Now, for most people, that can seem like a ton of work in order to find a niche that is valuable to people, yet related potentially, I'm assuming, to the product or service that you're selling. How would you approach putting something like that together?
It is work. It is a lot of work. Absolutely. If it was easy, everyone would do it. Right? Now, there are different ways, actually. There is the lazy way, which is, I don't know if it's lazy. Some people will call it the smart way as well, which is completely outsource it. You can have someone on Fiverr or Upwork that knows a particular industry, and what they do is to create industry reports or white papers for industries. That's all they do. So they know what they're looking for. Now, I wouldn't recommend to outsource the entire process, because you can outsource part of it, but I wouldn't recommend to outsource the ideology part, because really your industry report needs to link in some way to the product or service that you're offering at the end.
Sure.
And so the danger in outsourcing completely, like the finding of information and so on, and the creation without any direction, then there is a risk that actually the industry report is useful for the user, for the person who reads it, but doesn't bring you any business, because your offer doesn't become the logical next step for them.
Yeah.
And that's why. But that's how you can save time by outsourcing a big part of it.
Certainly. So, assuming you for say a small, maybe medium-sized business that's got some traction, it's got a small set of customers, how would you create a report that is based on information that is statistically relevant, or
Absolutely.
do you just survey a few people and put it together?
No, it needs to be statistically relevant.
Okay.
Like anytime you do an industry report, people will appreciate the work and thoughtfulness that you put behind it.
Certainly.
There are some industry reports that I have, for example, that we have created that our clients, they are keeping it like for the years to come, like they're referring back to it. But it took maybe like a month or a month and a half just to create it.
Okay. Because there's a couple of questions that come up in my mind.
Yeah.
One, how do you ensure that you have enough reach to be able to get those responses? That's one, because you may not know all those potential customers personally, and get them to actually fill in a survey or something of that nature. And the other question is, how do we ensure that the questions are not just related to the product or service that we're selling, but also going to elicit useful information for the industry at large?
This is a very good point. I mean, one of the best ways to do it, if you have the funds, is to hire an external agency. Like you have data collection agencies, that's what they do. You ask them for any type of data and they have it. And so that's already, if you want to pay for them, it will save you, and you don't have the reach, then it will save you the time of creating it. Another way in which we have done it is to create industry reports that are based on like surveying other people that are working in that industry. So not necessarily surveying the clients, like sometimes can be surveying the clients, sometimes can be other people, other businesses that operate in the industry, when we are looking at what works, what does it, what didn't work during the year. In fact, a lot of like a great time to do an industry report is at the beginning of the year. Because you can do, people are looking, they are in the mood of looking back and looking forward. So great industry report is like what worked in 2020, what's gonna work in 2021, or what's the behavior, if and there are a lot of, you can find also a lot of data on Google. There are a lot of publications that will publish their research for free. And that's how you interpret the data. That's also why they hire you as an expert, because you are able to take a piece of information, make up your mind, and find a better solution. And so that's how we have done it in our companies, and now we are advising our clients to do as well.
Certainly. And in terms of structuring the questions or the survey to ensure that it does not just answer your personal needs for your own business, but provides relevant information, how would you go about structuring that?
Well, so when I create the industry report, this particular industry report, I don't even think about my own needs or my own business needs.
Right.
I'm already immediately thinking about who is going to consume this industry report. So who are the companies? Because I want to create an industry report that is relevant for the potential client that I'm going to pitch. So I want to create something which is actually more relevant for them than for me. So what they want to know most of the time, as I mentioned, is, what were some of the marketing strategies that were working, What were some of the sales strategies that were working in that business? What other companies are doing in that same area that is working? What other companies are doing in the same area that is not working? What are some of the influencers or people that are more relevant to follow, or blogs to follow, or publications to follow in that particular niche or industry? So these are all things that can be part of that. Then we are going on the consumer point of view, where we can interview people on their buying behaviors. Or if you don't interview them, you can gather data from people on their buying behaviors. What trends are happening from the consumer point of view? How are they more likely to buy? Where are they more likely to buy? And so we have the industry report now gives the two realities: what their competitors or other industry leaders are doing in that field, and what's the buying behavior or behavior of not just buying behavior, but also search behavior of the potential client. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. I was just going to ask though, would you see value in having a survey design expert, I think that's what they're called, help you craft the survey, or is it something that you could do within the business without such an expert? Without that expertise?
It would, if you have no clue, it definitely helps.
Okay, yeah.
If you have no clue, because there are some people that then, if they've never done this process before, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And anytime you create something like this, either invest your own time to research, look at what other industry reports are putting in so you can get inspiration. Or if you are totally stuck, or you have more budget, there are two different ways. Like if you want to, maybe you don't want to do it yourself. You have the budget, hire someone else that can do it for you, that can understand creating surveys, that can understand also the industry where you're working in, because every industry will have different questions, depending on how something is relevant to a particular behavior or user and so on. So it depends. Like if you're bootstrapping and you don't have the budget, spend the time, look at other. But if you have the budget, then it's always worth investing in someone that knows what they're doing. It saves you a lot of time.
Yep, certainly. I can see you're essentially, with this industry report, you're essentially prospecting for potential clients in the industry and doing enough research to be able to start approaching them, because that's kind of baked into this whole process. Would that be correct? Okay. Excellent.
Exactly, because the first part of the outreach, as I mentioned before, starts from LinkedIn. And so when you're approaching someone cold from LinkedIn, saying, hey, I have this product, this is what we do, do you want to book a meeting? Right, you already know how it goes. Or, hey, we have created an industry report on your industry, and I thought you might find it really useful. Would you like a copy? What's more appealing now?
Yeah. Okay. Would you create or reach out on LinkedIn to ask what sort of information they might be interested in? Is that an option as well?
That's definitely an option. That's a very good idea, and that's definitely an option, because so it also depends on the relationship that you have, because now people are getting more and more time poor. So before, in the corporate world, you could have more traction by asking questions as a way in. Now we found that the effectiveness of this strategy is working less and less. You need to contact more people for to find a person to have the time to give it. But there is another way which works even really well, and which we approached, which is running a podcast and having a podcast.
Yeah.
Like you are in the podcasting world, so you're familiar with that. But in one of our companies, which is a sales trainer for recruitment agencies, we have the Millennial Recruiter podcast, because we target specifically millennials in the recruitment industry. And what we are doing, we are basically interviewing on the podcast some of our potential clients or ideal clients. So we will go to, learning and development managers of companies, or CEOs of recruitment agencies, or HR directors of recruitment agencies. And our first ask is, hey, we'd love to hear your views on this. Would you like to come on the show?
Certainly.
And we use the show as well as a part of the research. And there is a great guy called Nathan Latka, if I remember well. He does it. Are you familiar with him?
I've listened to some of his episodes, yes.
Right. I've been on this show a couple of times,
Right.
and I think it's genius because he built his whole entire like industry reports and information that gives to investors for SaaS companies by his podcast. So his
Hmm.
podcast is his research. So he
Certainly.
creates content, builds reputation, builds visibility, gets answers to question. That's a better leverage activity.
Certainly. And a brilliant strategy. It's certainly one that we advocate as well. So you've got the industry report. You're asking people to opt in to receive it, and then inviting them onto a masterclass or a webinar of sorts where you can talk about your solution to some of the issues that you've
Mhm.
identified in the industry report. And at the end of that, invite them to a one-on-one sales call or a discovery call, so to speak. Have I got the
Exactly.
process
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. There is one part of the process that immediately after, so if you're going in, they come from LinkedIn,
Hmm.
they get the industry report. Then at that point of the industry report, there will be immediately the option to book a call, and
Right,
we follow them up with a call as well,
right.
or with a message on LinkedIn just to check in that they've watched it, if
Hmm.
it's like, or that they've read it, to check in what their thoughts are. Because at the end of the day, your industry report, if it's not read, then it does do nothing.
Yeah,
And the majority of people, what they do, they download something and then they save it and do nothing because then they forget about it. So it's my responsibility to make sure that that person reads it. Because then otherwise the strategy doesn't work, and
yeah.
therefore that's where the another LinkedIn message comes into place, or phone call comes into place. And as well, there is an email, there is like a short like a newsletter that we created, that then links back to the industry report that we have created. So then it breaks down different points of the industry report in the newsletter to get people to go back over
Right.
and over again. And so that also, the industry report creates already the content of the email sequences, which then invites people either to a webinar or a masterclass that we
Hmm.
can do privately. So it can be for their own personal education, they can do outside business hours. Or we can also, we have done with a few companies, we said, hey, we have this industry report. Would you like us to do a masterclass on this for your team? And we will do it for free. And so
Right.
then they will get their teams together, and or sometimes there are 2 3 people, sometimes there are
Hmm.
40 people. And then at that point, then we deliver the information, there is a Q&A, so they can
Yeah.
test as well how well we know our stuff, to then lead again to an application call, or like in this case, like a follow-up, to arrange a meeting with them to see if they want now to get more out of it. And one really interesting piece actually on the masterclass part is that we will put a price point attached to it always. So even if we go in and we deliver it for free, we will generally have a choices of 3 master classes they can choose from. So we'll say we have these 3 master class. They choose. They all cost $500 each for us to deliver it to your team, or for some members of your team to come on the masterclass.
Hmm.
But you can pick one for free.
Right.
So now there is an added value. It opens up as well a conversation for maybe like for them buying also the other master classes if they want, which actually happened, and then build even the relationship and further, because for sometimes maybe like the consulting work and the offer that you're making is too high for what they're willing to
Yeah.
pay.
Yeah.
And so having like a masterclass that they can pay and they already know the price point, they already know what it is, it saves a lot of time during the sales process. So that's
So,
like a little tweak that made a huge impact, made a huge difference.
and quite a valuable tip, I would imagine, because you're, in a sense, vetting people through the entire process as well, and handling
Mhm.
objections as you come across them, which I'm assuming would really come to the fore on that discovery call that you have at the end of the webinar. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Because then at the end of the webinar or the masterclass, we then reach out, book an appointment to discuss.
Hmm.
At that point, we discuss business. Because if someone went through the industry report, they had the time to get there and their team on this masterclass, they are keen.
Certainly.
They are,
Uh,
they are keen.
just with positioning the webinar or the masterclass, are you making the promise of a particular outcome at the end of the webinar or masterclass. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. In every single part of the process,
right.
There is a promise of an outcome. Otherwise, there will be no reason for that person to join the call. I mean, their time is too precious.
Correct.
And therefore, we will always have out a specific outcome. Like, for example, we did a series of master classes on training millennials in the recruitment space. One masterclass was that they could choose which was one of the most popular, on creating induction plans for when the new recruiters would join the team.
Yeah.
And because that's one of the things that we do. Like when we go into a company, we take care of the entire induction plan of a new salesperson in the recruitment team.
Certainly.
Either to get them up to speed and support their existing learning and development department, or to add the learning and development, because maybe the company doesn't have one. Certainly. And the salespeople just join in like this. And so the outcome in that case was you will understand the stages of an effective onboarding process of your team. And then the next question for the consultation would be, so would you like to do it on your own, or would you like us to do it with you or for you? And that's where the masterclass automatically links to the product or service that we are selling.
Okay. Just a question on that. Would it make sense, because people are coming in having read the industry report into the masterclass to achieve a definite objective, would it therefore make sense to have them book in for a call prior to the actual webinar or masterclass as a precondition to watching the webinar or masterclass? Because that way it's already booked in and there is the ability to follow up, assuming that they attend, of course, the webinar.
That will be, I agree with you, that will be ideal.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not possible or practical.
Right.
And therefore, this type of conversation can happen just by email, and then exchange of email, which happens. Okay. But we always try our best to get someone on a call to decide which master classes they want to do. Right. So then it gives us an understanding of who they are, their business, and definitely deepens the relationship rather than an email exchange. So sometimes we dealt with some companies that ended up buying then in the future as well, but they said, oh, we like that particular master class, and this is the time arranged, and that's it, and that's happened.
So assuming you've had that call at the end of the webinar, where to from there? Do you pretty much sign them up straight away, or is there more to the process?
It depends on what's their process of buying at this point.
Okay.
Because I want to close the deal as soon as possible. So that's my aim. not to make it longer than it should be. But normally there will be a meeting to discuss the proposal that we're working with. If we don't know already their needs, that particular meeting is designed to find the specs of the work, understanding their needs, and then we come back, we create a proposal and come back for another meeting. That's, for example, that's what happens most of the time, where the first meeting is more like an understanding. We both have the willingness to work with each other. Yep. And now the conversation is much more open. The cards are on the table, so we can create a good proposal. Other times, for example, if we are selling other master classes or something that is not as bespoke as a consulting approach, but maybe is a series of live training that we do with their teams, and we already have our prices, our brochures, we already have everything, then the deal can be closed there and then on the first meeting. Right. Because we can say, okay, if this is what you want training, not consulting, here are our training packages, which ones do you want? And then sometimes they will say, if you are talking with a decision maker, they can say, yes, let's go ahead. Or the person might have to go back to the decision maker and then arrange another meeting with all of us. So then we can then work together.
Certainly. Excellent. So there's a degree of follow-up before you actually sign off on the actual deal itself. Is there anything else that we need to be aware of in implementing this personal selling strategy that we haven't quite covered as yet?
It's important is important to, as much as you have these like emails that are going out, personal touches is always what closes sales, in particular if you're talking about a larger, like a big volume sale.
Yeah.
And I always recommend like old school. Like I'm a millennial, but I'm old school in the in my sales approach. To really understand the person, understand what's important for them, in build that relationship where it just goes beyond the contract. But for example, I closed the deal I think last year, and we literally ended up just having the deal because I took them to a really nice Italian restaurant. I'm Italian, they love Italy, and I said, oh, you know what, forget everything. I know you like, I got this place, so why don't we just go out and have a good night out? We barely talked business there. We talked about the holidays that we had in Italy, the travels that they did, and it was just a great time. We literally didn't talk at all about business.
Yeah.
And then follow up the next day, hey, we had a great time, shall we meet and talk business now? And the deal was done there at the dinner. That's where the real deal was done.
And I've certainly had those experiences as well. I'm curious, could you walk us through an example, either one that you've experienced yourself or perhaps one of your clients, of what this entire process looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at one of our businesses, the recruitment training. We have on the first step, on when we are going on LinkedIn, we're actually finding people to get. So the work that we do is sales training for recruitment agencies, in particular for millennials.
Right.
So we find on LinkedIn HR directors or HR managers. These are the people that generally they have the budget for the development of the staff. And we ask them to be interviewed on our podcast. So in this case, we add an extra step. For many people, it's not practical having a podcast, or they like doing that. So that's why I haven't included it. But that's what gets us to have the information, and then we will put in the industry report. Okay. Then at that point, we will also send, if we already have that industry report, we'll also send them. So there is an industry report on how millennials respond in the workplace, and in particular, how millennial salespeople work. And that's the industry report that we have. So then at that point, we have, because we have them already on the show, we can talk about the report. Like when we are on the show and dropping in the interview, most of the time, either is them saying, hey, can I have the report? Or we ask them, hey, would you like a copy of the report? Or we just send them, say, as a thank you for being on the show, here's a copy of the report. Then at that point, we measure who then actually opts in to get it. So which data we collect, and then we follow up, in this case with a phone call. And that triggers as well the opt-in, triggers the download, where we have the report, the industry report, broken down in different emails that then refer back to the industry report itself. That's where then we reach out again back on LinkedIn, and we look at the people that, and by email as well, for the people that have, we know that they have opened the report, and we invite them on, and we approach them and say, hey, we have these 3 different trainings that we have. One was how to create your learning and development plan or your onboarding process for your new hires. That was one. And then we add the other 2. Say, hey, we charge £500, charging pounds, but with $500 for it. But we are doing at the moment an offer where you can pick one for free. And we are doing this because we want to build a relationship with you and see if there is going to be a potential of working together. So we are upfront from the first email, like, well, you can get this, but this is an effort to build relationship. It's not because we want to do free work and we love doing that. And then at that point, we follow up to make sure that they're registered on the masterclass, either via LinkedIn or by phone, and they choose. You will have a number of people that will never get back. Some people that say yes and then they don't register. Some people that then they register. And then when we deliver the masterclass, in this case, on how to build your onboarding process, then we invite them either to book a call straight away if the decision making is on the call, you can have a calendar system to book it in.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that even if the calendar system is in place, the majority of people still book the call when we're doing the follow-up, not in the moment of where the link is shared.
Okay.
But we have it. There are some people that do, saves us some work, saves us some back and forth. And then at that point, the call will be confirmed. So we meet them and we discuss either the opportunities, as I mentioned, of consulting, or for them to buy the remaining master classes. And then we see if there is any work that needs to be done.
Excellent. But that's a great overview, and I think it'll be incredibly valuable to listeners as well. Is there anything else that you feel we should cover in terms of personal selling that we haven't covered already?
If we're going back to basics, be a good human being. Think we can, people can get too caught up often in tactics and strategies, and they are important. Don't get me wrong. I'm a strategist, so I make my living off this. The strategy is crucial, but being a good human being, caring about people, building relationship, and understanding that in front of you there is not a wallet, but is another human being with their worries, their fears, their aspirations, their dreams like you have, and being able to be empathetic and create that connection will be more powerful than any other strategy, because that's the foundation. So yes, get on the strategy, but your human skills is what's going to win the game at the end.
And Simone, this has been great, but if you were listening to this episode of the podcast, what would be your top takeaway?
If I would listen to this podcast episode, the last thing I said, be a good human being.
Okay.
I think it can never be reinforced enough in the world we live in. The second thing is the multiple touch point approach to pre-qualify and build a relationship in a scalable way. So then you have a more productive meetings with companies. And then the third thing is the industry report approach that leads to the masterclass, that leads to the call. So that are the three core steps of the process that I want to reinforce.
Simone, GtTeX.org.uk that you have in the corner of your behind you is the website. Is there anywhere else that people could head to in order to find out more or to connect with you?
Yeah, best way is the website, as you mentioned, gtex.org.uk. So it's gtex.org.uk. But if you like podcasts as well, I mean, you're listening to this or watching, so you probably like podcasts too. We have a podcast which is called the Explode Your Expert Business Show. And there we interview great guests on how to build a business as a coach, speaker, trainer in the expert industry. So if that's your realm, that's where you work, if you're a consultant as well, and you want to understand more different strategies about building and scaling your business, then that's the show to listen to. So Explode Your Expert Biz Show.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Simone.
Thank you, Vinay. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today.
Likewise.